Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Creating Synergy for Informed Change, Transitioning Technology to the Warfighter. This is the Naval Postgraduate School's 22nd Annual Acquisition Research Symposium and Innovation Summit. Hosted by the Acquisition Research Program. Been a big fan of theirs for many years, and I've used this venue for both presenting as well as researching on topics. And I'm particularly excited to hear from the presenters that we have for you here today. 3 PhDs. I'm the only one who isn't. Just don't rub it in though. Dr. Jerry Kim, Dr. Kelly Alexander, and Dr. David Lechner. And they'll all be talking about how to improve acquisition through modular open architectures, thinking about how innovation can happen in the environment we find ourselves in, very different than the environment that Hyman Rickover found himself in, and then Dr. Lechner will help us understand how to use information technology tools to improve our business practices. With that, I think you've heard some of the, at this point, you know how this thing works. We'll present these papers one at a time, 15-minute windows, and then we'll have Q&A. Please use the chat session to identify your questions. Please keep them coming thick. And if you see one you like, hit it with a thumb up, and that will blow it up to the top. And that way I'll see it, and I'll make sure that your questions and the questions you like the looks of most get asked. So with that, I think we're going to switch over to the first presenter. And I think I'll ask the other panelists who won't be presenting to turn their cameras off. Dr. Kim, if you're ready to go first, then we'll just go with what's queued up in as the.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Jerry Kim. I am a EW specialist, and my talk is titled, Would Admiral Rickover's methods still work in today's complex acquisition landscape? Next slide, please. So before we go on, I'd like to baseline everybody and in the framework of how the DoD categorizes S&T. On the left, you see from the FMR, you have 7 categories ranging from 6.1 through 6.7. And on the right, from the Defense Acquisition Guidebook, there are 9 technology readiness levels going from 1 through 9. The basic research being 6.1, corresponding to TRL 1 and 2, and applied research being 6.2, corresponding to TRL 3, 4, and 5. And then you move into a more prototyping and system development stages of 6.3 and 6.4, which corresponds to TRL 4 through 7. And when we really talk about the value of death, we are really looking at that gap between 6.3 to 6.4. Once you pass TRL 7, it's what we consider a transition to the program of record. Next slide, please. So this slide is not meant to be an exhaustive list of all the discoveries in physics for atomic physics, but it's meant to give you guys an appreciation of how much 6.1 and 6.2 was needed in order to create the nuclear reactor. From the discovery of the hydrogen atom by Henry Cavendish in 1766, all the way to J.J. Thomson's discovery of the electron was about 130 years. So it took 130 years of basic research trying to develop the mathematical foundations, the physical understandings of the atom, to really get into an exciting time of the 20th century of atomic physics. You have great scientists like Rutherford and Schrodinger and Oppenheimer and many more that have developed a lot of this understanding on physics and mathematics, really getting to the point at 1942 when Enrico Fermi did his first controlled nuclear reaction. And as you can see here in this chart, Rickover was a child when all this research was going on at the 6.2 level. It's almost 50 years. And from 42, it will take Rickover another 16 years to get a nuclear reactor built and installed on the USS Nautilus for its journey across the North Pole. Next slide, please. So Rickover had a very interesting and very very colorful career. And This comes in the backdrop of the Second World War, and subsequent to that was the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, and that put an immense amount of pressure on the United States to excel and maintain the technological edge against her adversary. So in 1950, they came up with the concept of the nuclear-powered submarine. A year later, Congress authorized Hyman Rickover to oversee that development, and he held two positions. He had a position at the Bureau of Ships and a position at the Atomic Energy Commission. What this allowed him to do was to navigate through these bureaucracies, and he was able to control both the requirements and the acquisition pipelines. In 1958, the Nautilus, with this new nuclear reactor, was able to complete its North Pole journey, which really solidified the need for the nuclear-powered Navy. He created, obviously, the nuclear reactor program and a workforce that was able to take high risks and take full responsibilities for the program. And it also created a nuclear power fleet for the Navy, and that catapulted the Navy's propulsion technology far ahead of the Soviet Union. And we still hold that technology edge today. And he secured the budget to appropriately resource the, the nuclear reactors. Next slide, please. But that came with a lot of challenges. Um, he had to overcome significant challenges even during his time. The first challenge was to really transition from the scientific thinking to engineering thinking. These approaches are very different. Methods of science is they're really looking for exploration. So there's no timeline. It's focused on discovery. Does not really have a transition path, but it's seeking to acquire knowledge through answering series of complex questions. Uh, Engineering, on the other hand, is meant for technology development. It has specific timelines. It has an application for it to apply. It's got a transition path, and it's really taking what the acquired knowledge to solve a pragmatic problem. Rickover also faced competing priorities. So at the time, the Navy was competing against the Air Force. The Air Force um, mission was a big mission of theirs was the strategic missions, and Navy really wanted to get into the game. So they were more interested in putting nuclear weapons on carriers than making nuclear engines. So he had to compete with that. The USS Nautilus suddenly solidified the need for the nuclear engines, and today nobody would argue against a nuclear-powered submarine. He also had another contending technology at the time. The Aegis radars were just coming into the world, and so the Navy had to really balance the capacity requirements. Do we make every ship nuclear with Aegis, or have two Aegis destroyers instead? So, and lastly, Rickover had to really fight against the warfighter resistance for the adoptions of the reactor. Most of the operators at the time were comfortable using diesels, not nuclear reactors. He he had to overcome really, in today's DoD language, the 6.3 and 6.4 barriers. The six crossing over the 6.3 line is a really a change in community mindset. At some point, the science needs to stop, and then the engineering begins. And um, so different communities have different approach to the problem. Um, and then when you cross the valley of death to the 6.4 line, then it becomes a political problem. It requires the stakeholder adoption and their commitment for this technology. So at this point, really good requirements are key. And Rickover, because at the time the Navy was very reticent and resistant to the nuclear engines, he had to go to the SE&A and SECNAV to get their buy-ins. Next slide, please. So he was still able to overcome a lot of those obstacles and realize the nuclear reactor program. But since Rickover's time, the Goldwater-Nichols Act in 1986 significantly changed the way DoD did business. The legislation was passed to fix a lot of joint operation woes, but it created the combatant commands, and it moved a lot of the service chiefs to more of a training and equipping type of roles. And one of the big significant impacts out of this legislation that impacts the way we do business is the creation of USDA and how services are going to collaborate when developing capabilities. And how that was implemented really transformed into three major processes within the DoD. Next slide, please. And those three major processes comes in terms of the JSITS environment, which is generally controlled by the service chief on the left, the acquisition processes that's controlled by the secretariat on the right, and then the PPB process that guides your budgeting process. And in order to do a transition today, you really need to align all of these three processes together optimally. You got to have a very good, strong war doctrine. How are we going to fight tomorrow's war? That out of that needs to come out a technical requirement. How are we going to fight that war? And the capacity requirement that comes after that, which is how many of this technology are we going to build? And you have to balance between the S&T workforces and the acquisition workforce. One is risk tolerant and one is trying to mitigate risks. And then the requirement prioritization. What technology is more important? And then the resourcing that comes after that. Next slide, please. So in order to navigate through this process, what's difficult to do, especially in S&T, is it needs to mature along these TRL lines. So I developed a cartoon here going from 6.1 through 6.7. And if you look at the right side of the 6.4 line there, that's where industry really likes to play. Most of the scientific questions are answered. In terms of science and physics concern, a lot of it has been answered. It's largely an engineering problem. And if you look at on top of that, I created this technology vector. This is where you can move and develop technologies very quickly. But your innovation on the right in the blue, it's a lot smaller because most of that physics have been answered at this point. You're developing a new capability based on what's already known and how to be done. But this is an ideal place where industry likes to play. Program offices are obviously here, and this is where your entrepreneurs and industries at. Lots of funding here. But on the left, the science vector, the vector in yellow, is very small because the technology can't move very quickly because there's a lot of fundamental questions that need to be answered. And so when you're dealing with 6.1 to 6.3, most of your performers here are your academia, your national laboratory, service laboratories of those types. Industry really generally don't like to play in this area because the ROI is not that huge, but your innovation vector can be very large. You may be able to develop something that nobody has developed before. Next slide, please. So one of the approach that I was thinking is because there's a lot of money on the right side of 6.4. There's some money on the left side of 6.4, and that's really minimal money to carry that technology across this valley of death. One of the things that I was thinking about is if you can take your traditional S&T workforce to really push that across up to the 6.3 line, and somehow incentivize the IP or have a more provisional type of licensing that allows both the commercial and the government sectors to move that across that valley of death. And then once the technology meets up to the 6.4 line, perhaps the government can pick up and further develop and mature the technology in its appropriate venue. But at that point, you can use your standard FAR-like contracts. But we really need to focus on different contracting strategies and how we manage our IPs. Next slide, please. So the question is, can Admiral Rickover reproduce what he did back in the 50s today? It's no one will question its value, the nuclear reactor value in terms of the war doctrine and technical requirement. But in terms of the capacity requirements, I have those in yellow, and so in S&T and acquisition, largely because how you know how many of our ships are going to be equipped with nuclear engines. That's a budgetary problem, and this current budgetary state, it's really hard to make those arguments. Requirement prioritization. Rickover back then, he controlled the requirements, and he doesn't have that in this current environment, and so that allows so he may not be able to do that. So all said here, he would probably still be able to do the nuclear reactor technology, but it's because of the institutions he left behind. If he was to start anew, he would have a lot of challenges today. Last slide, please. So the final takeaway here is there's really two worlds of science and engineering. Um, we need to leverage the strengths and weaknesses of each level of efforts. 6.1 and 6.2 need to be resourced and scaled correctly to leverage revolutionary 6.4 efforts if disruptive technologies are to be realized. And the government workforce needs to be just as technical as the industries. We should look for um, acquiring creative contractual strategies, exploring tools like CSO and OTAs, and the workforce is willing to be trained and needs to be trained and be willing to take on higher risks, and a creative IP strategy is needed. Um, the higher the technology, the higher impact the technology will be faced with a larger inertia, and that really requires a champion with clear roles and responsibilities. And lastly, the Goldwater Nichols Act is very significant. And uh, could you go back one step? It's very significant. And so therefore, the alignment between your acquisition requirements and PPB process has to be really aligned. That translates to clear war doctrine. Scientists and warfighters need a venue to directly interact to develop the technology, and 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 the and the and the operators need to be willing to write riskier requirements. And that concludes my talk. Thank you.
All right, nicely done, Dr. Kim. Thank you very much. When I read the paper, I was particularly intrigued at being a lived inside this world that got created over time. It made me wonder if I had it to do over again, how would I do it differently given the current circumstances? Maybe we'll get some good questions about that coming forward. So with that, I do believe now it is time for Dr. Alexander. Do I have that right? Okay. All right, ma'am, over to you.
Okay, I'm not seeing the charts yet. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Kelly Alexander. On the next chart, I sort of begin to talk about this topic that is a modular open systems approach to enable technology transition. And on the next chart, I baseline the discussion. Thank you. I baseline the discussion with thinking through some of the drivers that are bringing about the change in acquisition right now. And a lot of the activity in the digital engineering policy and guidance, the 2018 DE strategy with the goals that established the need to transition the community into a digital acquisition lifecycle. The data strategy followed that. The 5000.97 brought in the digital engineering responsibilities across the DoD, and then some of the modeling and simulation guidance. And these, over time, have ushered in a digital transformation that's providing an opportunity where our systems engineering can modernize and take advantage of some of the assets that have been established through digital engineering. And I just mentioned a few of them here. The systems engineering modernization effort is part of OSD's implementation of digital engineering into systems engineering practices, policies, and workflow. So on the next chart, I talk about the systems engineering modernization effort that OSD is undertaking. This was based on a study that CERC, the Systems Engineering Research Center, oversaw. And as we were doing that study and began to think about how do we begin to change the community to embrace some of these modern practices, and to the left of the systems thinking brain that we're trying to establish is the notion that while you are developing systems, you have three concurrent processes or really life cycles that are happening. You have the systems engineering life cycle that includes your milestone reviews and your different decision points. The data and models have life cycle depending on where you are in the design phase of the system and what type of data has been generated, what the event is. Some of those have expiration dates. Some of them may exist throughout the life cycle, but for the most part, they identify a point in time and support a decision. And then the engineering life cycle, as you go from some of the technology, your integration, and then your system development phases, prototyping. So those life cycles need to complement each other so that you know the data that supported the different variations of your engineering life cycle and the systems engineering decision that was supported. And all three of those concurrently identify what we call the systems engineering supra system. Now, part of that, in order to think through how that changes and challenges the way that we do acquisition, is thinking through a mental model that is based on an agile mindset, where we don't necessarily do the normal V that we all kind of grew up on, but understanding that iterating on your system requirements and the development life cycle is a more agile and allows for a quicker reaction to the warfighter needs. Model-based systems engineering brings along the ability to establish and understand the integration effort and the combined input into the system. And the data that supports the models and the modeling and simulation begin to establish an understanding and a level of knowledge that allows you to be able to make those decisions. And all of these pieces are really based on the ability to collaborate, to have a data-centric approach where those that need to make decisions and understand how that decision was made and what it represented are all able to collaborate, to share and understand the models and data that support the lifecycle decision. And overall, the vision of systems engineering modernization is to build this seamless and efficient acquisition and engineering process that integrates across the system lifecycle. On the next chart, I talk about the abstract for this particular paper that we wrote. And we talk about technology transition, this valley of death. Those of us that have worked in technology development, S&T, program management across the board know that that is it can be a high risk time in a program that results in delay or cancellation. I heard an earlier briefing and a gentleman brought up the Future Combat Systems program. I worked on technology development for that, and he made the point that I'm making now, that it was really challenged with some high risk technologies where we didn't fully understand the development risks and weren't able to articulate them enough to make good decisions. So the way MOSA can enable this technology transition, later I talk about a framework. And basically this framework is taking the principles of MOSA early in the development cycle, so that as you begin to transition the technology, you have some predictability in the integration effort. So the use of modular architecture, interface management. I heard a briefing earlier this morning that also talked about interfaces being an important part of our development and acquisition life cycle, and then building this enabling environment, which I define through model-based systems engineering and some of the processes and access to the data and the infrastructure that allows you to support the different variations that may be considered, and then to qualify or disqualify later some of your system architecture. What if the exercises that you may be going through to establish your trade-offs. And so as those three, we call them pillars of MOSA, are applied early in the development cycle, you have this relationship between the development and the system that this technology will transition into, so that you're able to manage and coordinate that relationship very early, and to continue this iterative relationship with the configuration, so that you can make decisions and so that you can determine if a technology is too far behind, and or you can replace, and through having system components that adhere to defined standards and interfaces, you're able to replace or upgrade, or if instead of a delay, you just replace a component. On the next chart, I talk a little more about sort of the problem with technology transition, and this problem that creates this valley of death, and where the MOSA can bring and some sort of I would say, lessen the risk in this defense innovation ecosystem. And some of the common challenges that, if you trace through programs, problems integrating into the system, or requiring extensive modification that really doesn't allow them to have a smooth transition from the valley of death. The proprietary components that may be developed that may become unavailable or unsupported, sometimes even before you go into the production or into later phases. You may be faced with a situation where you have to replace a component, and then some of the closed systems that require a significant investment in development, integration, and sustainment. On the next chart, I talk about how MOSA can address these challenges. And the modular open systems approach includes the architecture that this chart is primarily talking about, using a modular architecture. And if you start at the bottom of this, at the bottom of this chart, and the use of interfaces that adhere to these consensus-based open standards that do allow for you to have the ability to not only integrate later, but to incorporate or refresh the technology, or allow for further innovation if you, in your modular architecture, if you understand that there are components that you believe will experience multiple upgrades or refreshes in the technology. Also, the ability to scale and adapt to the changing environment that may, and I'm talking the fielded environment, that you may need to upgrade or modify, and MOSA offers you the opportunity to do that. On the left side of this graphic, at the bottom, enabling the cost savings and avoidance of the schedule reduction. And again, that's because you are in this modular architecture where, rather than delay, you can replace and reuse common components. In the product engineering is one of the acquisition approaches, I know primarily in some of the aviation systems, that allow you to have a common component across multiple systems, and then enhancing the ability to have competition and affordability in the system during the production, and also during the sustainment. Next chart, please. So as you lay the technology transition challenges against the MOSA benefits, it establishes the ability for some of the pillars to provide that bridge over that valley of death. And the benefits I talked about in the previous chart. I talked about the transition challenges, so I won't go into that any further. But on the next chart, we talk about the considerations during technology development. And for some reason, this chart has the same 3 bullets twice. I apologize for that. But during your technology development, building in this architecture development and managing the architecture is a key component of being able to realize the benefits of MOSA. And by having the model-based systems engineering tools and infrastructure that allow you to consider optional solutions, to understand what what the limitations of your different trade-offs are, and to inform decisions on what configurations you want to move forward with. Interface management supports the ability to integrate and your interoperability goals to include the reuse strategies or other ways that you want to allow for an upgrade, modification, or other innovation initiatives. And then have a plan for managing and implementing your consensus-based open standards. And this would facilitate the future upgrades and technology refresh cycles. Some of those consensus-based open standards are managed and provided in the ASSIST database, so that programs can find those there and begin to plan for how to implement them into their baseline. The next chart, please. On the next chart, so essentially incorporating those MOSA principles into the technology development strategy, not necessarily a document, but I'm talking about your approach, your acquisition strategy, that part of your technology transition strategy. If you consider these principles of MOSA, that you're able to bridge the valley of death. That includes your modular architecture development and management, interface management, and the open standards usage and management. And then the final chart, I just give a point of contact. If you how these MOSA principles can enable. And then the final chart is additional points of contact and where you can find resources that tell you more about modular open systems approaches. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander. By the way, there's 73 participants, and I think we actually have a question already. We're not going to deal with that right now, but the rest of you, please don't be shy. You don't have to step up to the microphone like you do when the actual research symposium happening for real, in live, in Monterey next year. Let's all hope. Anyway, so please keep those cards and letters coming. There's no penalty for making multiple deposits. So with that, I think we're ready for Dr. Lechner. Are you queued up and ready, sir?
Sir.
All right. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Guertin. Appreciate, and thank you everyone for attending this session. This is the best session this afternoon, and we're not biased as the authors about that. I am a section manager at the Navy Research Lab in the Tactical Electronic Warfare Division. And our big disclaimer that I'm requested by my management here. This reflects experiment data tools for one specific branch and does not reflect the views or usage by the entire organization, at least not yet. And they're aware of this and following the work very closely. As a background, I have about 40 years of experience within the defense industrial complex here. And we're going to talk about a tool that we developed at our branch that's a follow-on to a tool that I'd built back about 5 years ago when I was working with NAVC. Just next slide. Next slide, please. When I took over at the branch, we were using different methods, but we had several questions, several problems that we wanted to overcome or resolve as we manage research projects. The listings here, I'll just summarize here is, again, what are the technical objectives of the research? What are we trying to do? How are we doing as a branch from a business perspective? Is the cash flow okay? Are we going to run out? Are we going to fully obligate and expend the money that we're supposed to? Do we have enough work for the current staff? Do we have enough staff for the current work? Do we need to hire people? When do we need to hire people? Are we meeting schedule? Are we meeting our technical objectives? And how does the different sections compare? We had 3 sections within our branch. And also, how does the work compare between the different sponsors? And who should be our sponsors? Who should be our future sponsors? And these questions translate well between, I think, to other warfare centers and other labs within the DoD as far as the Army and the Air Force. Next slide. The way we used to do this was with PowerPoint slides and Excel files. Imagine that. I'm sure there's only a few people out there that are doing quarterly reviews or monthly reviews by updating the charts. The call comes out, go out, get the new data, refresh the data, answer, what happened to this action item, update the slides, get them in, go show the boss. The problem with this, besides the stress, is that the data is not integrated. There's no trend analysis. There's no historical. There's no predictive analysis. And each project is examined in isolation at one time with a snapshot of, okay, here's how we are right now. And sometimes it's historical, like maybe there's a cost curve that shows how we did cost. But generally speaking, we're looking at status right now. Next slide, please. What we built in order to try and do this better was a set of data dashboards that summarized all aspects of the project, of our portfolio of projects. This is just the opening. This is a summary of the branch data. And by the way, this is all fake data that I'll be showing you. This is our experimental sandbox version of the tool. We have an actual real live version of the tool with real data. We're not allowed to publicly release that. This is fake data. This is nothing real. We're not really developing the lightsabers and Death Stars that we show as far as some of the data here. But this summarizes from the branch perspective things like, okay, the box chart shows where the money's coming from, how much the work is going on, where the energy is, our strategic mission statement, the money between the different sections, and then key metrics that we're trying to keep. We just started doing this as far as, okay, how many technical projects are on track? How many of our technical objectives are we meeting? How many technical papers or reports have we delivered so far this year? How much money is coming in total? How much money has not been given to us yet? Next slide, please. But all that data dashboard is backed up by a bunch of Excel files. And it's interesting, I started off doing this with one big Excel file, and then I learned that for these type tools, you need lots of little Excel files. And that actually makes it all run a lot faster. So, and you need a common key, a database key for everything. So we use the charge number for the project as the common identifier. And by doing this, Power BI, the Microsoft tool behind this, which is on all the DoD email servers, and Office Suite servers, by the way, you were able to slice the data. So whenever we select the charge number on each page, all the data gets refreshed. But Excel is very easy to use. Everyone knew how to do it. All the project managers, project leads, researchers knew how to update an Excel file. And our objective was just a couple of minutes, 5 or 10 minutes a month worth of data updates. Next slide, please. This shows example of the technical goals, the North Star goals, so to speak. Allows easy tracking and able to see that, this project, and you can slice the data a different way, but this project, most of the goals are being met. Maybe on another project, some of the goals are being met, and on down towards the bottom, these are the project or the goals that are not doing so well. And we normalize the goals so that there's no key data being publicized on these websites. But these are all behind the Microsoft Office firewall for the organization. There's the data is kept there along with all of our Excel spreadsheets. Next page. This was essentially the quad chart view, the historical quad chart. And by clicking on different projects at the top, clicking the checkbox, all the data refreshes instantaneously. It shows us the cost history, expenditures, some of the key goals, and the picture, the OV1, the OV2, whichever level of goal. Also the key administrative data for the project. This is consistent with the quad chart in the PowerPoint slide. Next slide. We also built in a staff loading component. So this on the left side, that keeps track of how well each project is staffed on the top, and the left bottom has how over or underworked each person is. On the right side of the top, it shows how different people are working on each project. And the right side on the bottom shows how different projects are being covered by different people. So we can see some projects are very broadly based, very cosmopolitan, using the term from earlier. Other projects maybe are just one person. We can see instantly right away where we need more staff and whether everyone has enough work or not. This may not be important in a big program office from the perspective of the project goes, but the PEO's deputy or the PEO might want to know, okay, where's my staff working on? Where's my contract team working on? Which contract branch is overworked? Next slide, please. This one is a more schedule-focused quad chart. It shows the major tasks, the task completion status and metrics, some of the dates, the people loading, and again, some administration information. We have several other data views besides the ones that I just showed. This is just a subset. We're at about, I think it's around 15 or 20 different tabs on the Power BI tool. Again, all backed up by the same data. And in this one, it's not a checkbox. It's a pull-down menu. You just pull down and pick which project you want the data for, and everything updates right away. Next slide, please. The project we're talking about is actually right here. It's just the R&D project PM tool that we've developed. But this is an outgrowth of work I did 9 years ago, I'm sorry, 5 years ago. We started about 7 years ago. When I was at MITRE and work we did at NAVC, we did a demonstration where all of this green and yellow boxes, acquisition program type data, we did a demonstration using SharePoint lists and Excel files. And that was not as beautiful as Power BI, but it tested the same type of concepts. And we built a data schema for those objects. Also over on the far right, sustaining engineering role by is a set of data. There's a paper that's been submitted. It's in the proceedings for this event by Dr. Kimiko Dunn at Naval Undersea Warfare Center Keyport. And what they have done is a bunch of really interesting and fabulous work with financial data, pulling it right out of ERP into Power BI graphics and Power BI-based tool. They do an update once a month. They pull all the data out of ERP now and put it into a Power BI tool. But this shows the whole framework as far as from requirements to research to acquisition, fielding, and sustainment, and how we're only attacking a part of it, but you can start to think of how a tool like this might be useful in different aspects as well. And as I said, we've already done, next slide, please. We'll show you some of the acquisition work. This is work we did 2018. We took an acquisition strategy and changed it from a 50 to 100 page document, depending on the size of the project. Back then, we didn't quite have the framework reduced size, but we reduced it down to approximately 200 data fields, some of which were free text, maybe half of them, but the other half were type enforced as far as dates. The goal of that investigation was to try and have a TurboTax type of model for entering data, and then in like an Amazon shopping for a review of the data sets, where you could compare the answer from a project between multiple projects. The interesting feedback at the time was that they couldn't print it and carry it around, and it was hard to make comments, but it was really useful in comparing different projects and being able, the users were imagining ways to use it with data analytics tools. And we were able to route, fill in a data set in about 2 days, and then route it around in a couple of weeks to get our fake data project approved back at the time. Next slide. So in summary, some of the lessons we learned, the tool is helping us manage our technical projects more coherently. It's keeping all the data. We're going to be able to assemble a historical base of projects to compare data sets between them. and compare how we're supposed to be doing and compare it to our strategic objectives. This is only being used within one branch of one division at NRL right now. It's about a dozen projects. We built this whole tool in about 4 months using Power BI. And a shout out also to Mr. Austin Tamez, my co-author with Envisioneering, who helped me build the tool. Neither one of us had any experience in Power BI, and we were both teaching each other how to do it and how to integrate the graphics to some of the trickier parts. It was easier to make the tool than it was to start using it. Actually using these things, the problem is 20% technical and 90 to 100% social. It's a lot harder to use tools like this and hard to maintain them than it is to create them. But we didn't have to pay any licensing fees because the Microsoft Office already included Power BI for us. And other than that, thank you again. And we have packaged up the sandbox essentially in a zip file and are running through a public release case to give that out to people so that anyone else in the DoD infrastructure can get a copy and then experiment and play with it how they want to. And hopefully in the future, we get a chance to recreate the acquisition items in Power BI and create a more forward-leaning next step comprehensive tool. We don't have anything like that authorized yet, but I think cohesively, this is sort of where the future is and where we're going. Thank you so much. That's it.
All right. Thank you, David. Wonderful to hear your voice again. We've had a chance to work on several projects together over the years. It's amazing how much you really, really, really don't want to burn a bridge in this business. You never know when you'll get another person coming up that you've worked with in the past. So we're going to continue with this discussion and Q&A. So keep them coming till the top of the hour. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes doing an overview. I didn't introduce myself very much at the beginning because I really wanted to make sure that the presenters got into the meat of their discussion. But as my most recent job is Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, I lived in the nexus of a lot of these things. How do I get a better understanding of the portfolio through things like business intelligence tools? How do I help program managers and PEOs see how they are going to manage their activities through better utilization of modular and open, and then how to live within this evolved machinery of defense acquisition that we currently enjoy. Put that in quotes. But one thread going through these different research papers might be iterating on a requirement and improving over a life cycle. Dr. Kim, you might weigh in on this at the beginning because nobody thinks of modularity and open architecture and flexibility over time when they think nuclear power, but it is a very scalable technology. And that if you look at the size of the nuclear power plant we put to see with the Nautilus compared to what we're putting out on the Columbia or the Ford class, pressurized water reactors with turbine generators, right? Or turbo reduction propulsion. So very scalable technologies, maybe not necessarily the same way we think about it in terms of modularity or model-based systems engineering, but there may be a piece there as well. So with that, let's turn to the Q&A section and see what we have for questions. I might push the moderators bolt of blue out of the sky button on a couple of the answers, but I'll let the panelists answer them as best they can. So first question up, and oh, by the way, for those of you who want to put a check mark thumb up on questions that are posted that you like, that will help us understand what you want to hear most from. There's over 60 of you here. and hopefully get a good round of conversation flowing. So Dave, you could turn off your camera now. I think this one is for, well, actually I think about it, all four of us could have our cameras on if you want. But for Dr. Kim, the question is, you can probably see it in the Q&A section here. Lessons learned essential for navigating through significant periods of change. And this has been echoed throughout the day so far. I know Steve Morani brought it up. Even when I presented my paper during panel 2, is something I talked about. So why don't you take a crack at this question and see what your thoughts are?
So I think in terms of S&T, the idea of discovering, doing the research, transitioning to an engineering problem, and then turning into a system that is operationally relevant, those ideas, those concepts are common no matter what technology you're working in. Whether you're working on nuclear power plants or an advanced radar system, uh, at some point there was physics and mathematics and pure science that needed to be worked out, and then once you understand that, you move to an engineering problem of developing and prototyping their system. So and depending on what it is, it could take many years to do. So I think that process is the same. What I think the current construct right now in the DoD that makes it extremely challenging, which people in the past, like Admiral Rickover or Admiral Myers, who was the father of Aegis, had less issues on, is navigating really around all of this acquisition and requirements processes. And right now, what's happened is over the time is that the responsibilities, or who is that belly button, right? So when that technology fails, when that technology or does not transition or it does not succeed, currently it's really difficult to point a finger. In Rickover's day, if the reactor goes bad, you know where to find and pick up the phone and call. That's really difficult today. It's distributed. um, so so as you walk through along these different TRLs of this technology, it's becoming more important to have a champion and to really somebody that can shepherd through both the PPBE, the POM process, the um, the the acquisition process, and the requirements process. And so if you're going to look at something that is truly revolutionary, it's not going to fit within your 5-year POM window. Um, it may have to go beyond. So you really need a champion that's willing to take it beyond that POM cycle. And those are the things that I think if you want the transition to happen, is particularly, if it's a modest software upgrade, sure, 1 or 2 year effort. If it's swapping out a bunch of servers, okay. But when you're really talking about revolutionary, disruptive technology, you really need that champion.
Great answer. Thank you very much. Actually, one of the questions came in from Joe Bradley, direct to me, so I'm going to take it. What am I focused on these days? Thank you very much for asking that question. In my last job, half of the Navy acquisition budget was centered on shipbuilding, and so I had to spend a lot of time in on that. Currently, there's a tremendous amount of innovation, or at least exploration anyway, in how to do shipbuilding better. And I'm carrying that forward, even to the extent where, we could maybe do a more robust job of building different kinds of platforms, uncrewed surface, undersea and air platforms, shipbuilding at scale, including things like icebreakers. There's a lot of interesting things going on in how do we improve shipbuilding through more modern development practices. Now, ultimately, we still have to have, people pulling cable and running pipe and doing well beads, but the more we can automate those things and use innovation to drive performance, I think is something we need to explore vigorously as a national strategic challenge. Another thing that I've been working on is advancing the speed of delivery. Dr. Alexander and I have both written on application of modular open system approaches. But really now, as we've been evolving these technology frameworks and open standards, even to the point of being able to more coherently test whether or not we're getting what we asked for. Those tool suites are evolving, and we can more effectively determine whether or not we're actually getting the power of modularity, as opposed to just asking for it and hoping it as an outcome. Uncrewed platforms and the effects at scale through high levels of interaction. We've done integration of individual things for a long time, but having them interact in ways that create additional effects, that's kind of new. Even in Ukraine, they're spending a lot of time spending their national efforts in pushing back the Russians and using automation to make things, but maybe not so much in the way of swarming and other kinds of technologies. So it's something that those are areas I'm particularly interested in. I continue to be a cyber physical kind of guy. So one foot in things like shipbuilding and another foot in how do we advance the practice of making software driven things and getting them out to the field faster. So thanks for that question. Let's see, let's move off of me and then on to, actually just a little bit of me, if you don't mind. I was also the director for operational test and evaluation. And one of the things that Admiral Rickover did not have to deal with was being on operational test and evaluation oversight. So Dr. Kim, if you wanted to think about one of the other things that we've done in the days since Rickover of trying to make sure we get what we ask for, how do you think that having OTE as an oversight agent with Hyman Rickover, Admiral Hyman Rickover on the other side of on the receiving end, how do you think that would have gone?
I think from the nuclear reactor program, Rickover had very stringent requirements, and he was involved in almost every testing of that reactor. So testing and evaluation was definitely a big component of the success of that program. And in general, certainly the T&E is a necessary thing as we design these systems and get them fielded out. The cost of doing T&E is certainly, they're experts in this panel, in this symposium. They can talk more in depth to it, but those are some of the things that needs to get done when we're talking about moving it up to TRL levels that need to be operated in operational environment. Big stakes like nuclear reactor working on big safety. The sub-safe program is probably one of the safest programs that we have in the Navy, and that came from historical examples of not having to repeat the Thresher example. And so some of these testing and evaluations have purposes for it. It's something we certainly can't get away from, but we also want to minimize. We should be testing and evaluating in those areas that make sense to do, not to do testing just for testing purposes.
All right. I also think that he was super focused on safety as a part of reactor design and accountability for outcomes. I'm not sure he would have really liked to have an oversight agent over the top of him, just on a personal level, but I don't think
Right.
I don't think he would have had a problem getting through operational test and evaluation. He just might have a problem dealing with an
Yes.
office of OT&E.
Yes.
All right, so we were just talking about 6162 and advancing through the perceived valley of death, although it is real in certain places. But Dr. Lechner actually works at the Office of the Naval Research Lab. Seeing as how we've talked about that a couple of times, do you have any thoughts on that, Dave?
As far as the Valley of Death, Nick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's been a problem that Dr. Megan Kramer and I spent quite a bit of time working on when I was supporting NAVC. It's a non-trivial problem. What we tried to do a couple years back was set up a rapid contracting process where we had fewer custom documents, and at the time we developed a standard template, a contract document, and where you could just and also a standard acquisition process that was documented. And we had a thick document with thin appendices that were very data heavy. And that's what led to the development of the tool in 2019, where the tool was focusing on those data elements. But that was an office management trying to speed up the procurement office's ability to do things. Ultimately, the communications between the research community and the program office community becomes super important, and it's hard. I've worked both in program offices and with the research community at university level and at NRL, and it's hard. Both are so busy all the time with the flow of what they're trying to do. It doesn't help for the research team to do too much integration stuff early because it's expensive. We don't know if it's going to work yet. And then we're all done and we rush, we have the party, we're ready to transition it. And they said, well, we've got all this homework to do. We've got interfaces to work out and software to revise and things to fix in the design and reliability issues. And that takes money. And typically the planning for that takes a year or two. And until you know the research project works, you don't know if you want to start budgeting all that money or turn the team on to support them. So no easy solution for anyone, but the subtleties and things involved in this continue to be a challenge. I'm sorry I don't have a quick answer on that.
Thanks for playing along, though. Dr. Alexander, I don't know if you would care to weigh in on the Valley of Death a little bit. I think you mentioned it in your talk.
Yes, so I believe it is real and it has multiple reasons, and they're not all technology driven. We just heard Dr. Lechner talk about the coordination and synchronization between the PM office and the tech-based folks. And I actually looked at DAU's website, and there are over 19 different either committees, groups, or initiatives that are trying to manage and help lessen the technology transition pain. And that was what sort of spawned my paper to talk about MOSA, because most of the things that were addressed in these different areas were the business, the funding stream, and all of those are important. And the negotiation with the PM and exactly the timing and schedule, the funding, all of those are important. And so I just wanted to open the idea of looking at the way that we actually start the development cycle, start it with the end in mind, and to do a pull more than a push, I guess.
Excellent. We do live in an exciting time of change, and there's so much that's happening now. I'm actually kind of multitasked here this week, as I'm also in a conference that's being worked around the tools and technologies associated with advancing the artificial intelligence practices, which are just rocket sled fast these days. The technology is evolving the hardware technology is evolving much more readily, and the models and the different large language things that are going to probably permeate our future world. I was filling out, I hope all of you have filled out, or at least in the process of filling out your conference feedback forms. please do. I've filled mine out already, and I might have to fill it out again, depending on what else I find over the course of the next 2 days or day and a half. But I think that if one of the things that the acquisition research program could look at for next year is how is AI and the application of large language models shaping our business. I don't know if the three of you have had any recent experiences with using AI or large language models in the context of the material you presented here so far. If you just want to punt on that, I'd be okay with that as well.
Last week there was a MOSA symposium. Monique Ofori's on it. If you would type in the Q&A the name of that forum. But one of the topics was MOSA and AI. Now, I did not participate in that. The director at that time, Ms. Nadine Geyer, participated in that. So there is conversation ongoing right now for how AI can enable either managing, testing, or understanding the metrics and how to evaluate and assess MOSA. There are ongoing conversations about that.
Yeah, actually, I gave the keynote for that one, and I was the one that opened it up on how AI would influence.
I knew that. I knew that, sir. That's why I mentioned it, because I know that they didn't have the most. Let's say, I will just say that that's a tough topic, and there's some good papers out there though on it. I've seen out of DevCom and some commercial folks talking about that MOSA and AI.
Just a comment also, we look at the lack of acquisition data and type enforced data as being a key, creating that data and getting it archived is a key enabler to building better AI tools for both the creators of projects and then the reviewers of projects as well. And once we get a couple hundred to a couple thousand projects of data set archived, it'll be a bunch of real interesting research and experimentation people can do. The other thing that's important is completion data. Not only what you're planning to do, but hey, did it actually work out the way you thought it would? Because that way the AI tools and the managers can tell that it's good, that's a good pattern of the data to help people with.
Right. Actually, I got distracted there for a second, but oh, now I remember. Here's a tricky question. Are you guys still using PowerPoint for your program reviews, or are you all in on the tool?
So good question. We're in a transition mode right now. I actually have a drill out on an email for my team. I gave them 3 ways to update the data. They can send me the data and we'll put it in the tool. And then we export the slide from the tool to PowerPoint to give to our division manager, or they can update the slide if they want, and then we input that data into the tool. But we're using a mix because it's actually easier for some people to handle that. And culturally shifting that, Mr. Ballison asked about that. The culture shift is really, really hard. But scientists don't like reporting data on any tool, so we don't consider that to be too big of a challenge in comparison. We always had trouble. We had trouble getting PowerPoint. We have trouble getting Excel. We have trouble getting cost data. Everyone's just so busy with their algorithms over here.
I was one of the researchers at Senior Software Systems Engineers, my job title, when I was at Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute.
Yeah.
And while I was there, they basically tore off the Band-Aid and had prototyped the tool, vetted it, and then said, "That's it. We're not doing PowerPoint anymore." And you don't get a passing grade unless you show up in the tool and talk your way through the program using that as the communication method. It was a little bit. I was one of the early adopters, so I was trying to pull people along for the ride. But like I said, it's when you're used to not having to report in that way, it's something to overcome. But it's the same or less amount of work, and so that's actually came out in your paper. It's actually less work once you get over the hump.
Absolutely.
Can I add a comment to that? One of the initiatives we're looking at OSD is systems engineering tech review modernization, really agile systems engineering, but adding models and data as the driving force to the reviews. And I've had a couple of the Army has come through. They're doing some programs that way. Also, the Air Force and Navy. We sort of had a joint meeting of the minds to lay that out. And I'll be back with the Army in a few weeks talking about that more, sort of building this coalition of the willing that are the early adopters of trying to go completely data-driven and model-based for their milestone decision support.
All right, while we have you with your microphone off on, Dr. Alexander, and by the way, the three of you have been doing a nice job of, while we've been talking, typing in answers in the text, but sometimes there's opportunities to provide nuance that might be missed out of a text information. One of the questions earlier was, hey, well, so what standards are there? And you did a nice job talking about the future airborne capability environment in your answer. And I just wanted to opine for a moment that there's a few others out there that are worthy of exploration, like sensor open system architecture, open mission systems, Victory. On the hardware side, hardware open
CMOS.
system technology, VITA, open VPX, that sort of thing. So there's quite a few of them out there on the compute hardware side and the software side, but there are not so many on the pure hardware side. I don't know if there are any things that we're doing in the areas of kind of standardizing modularity or the approach for modularity in the physical side of cyber physical. Is that a thing, or is that not a problem that needs to be solved?
I am aware that the ground combat vehicle folks have a, I think they sort of drive it by a reference architecture in the hardware domain for, and then they use the Victory standard. And that's one thing that's not talked about. A lot of programs use multiple open standards. It's not like one open standard necessarily supports the entire program vision. But that's what I would say, that a lot of the work, Victory, I think has a hardware centric portion, and so does I'm trying to think of the open architecture framework, the name of it, for the ground combat vehicles, but that's the way they've approached an openness to a hardware centric program.
And when I was also the Marine Corps acquisition executive, their amphibious combat vehicle is kind of a base vehicle, and then changeable capability when it gets produced. It either gets a gun, or it gets a command and control function, or it gets a dealing with the sick and wounded function. So they can, on the time they're built, they could change it, but the base vehicle is the same. So the modularity is in basically the payload. So anyway, so there's some approaches out there that are worthy of consideration. All right, we're getting close, about 5 minutes out. I'd like to give each panelist like a couple of minutes just to round out their conversation, add any last minute thoughts they have. We'll take them in order of presentation. So Dr. Kim, why don't you go ahead and give us a minute or two of any last minute thoughts you have as we can work to close this thing out at the top of the hour.
I think my last minute is because of our because there's a very high demand of pushing technology really quickly. We are looking for solutions that are more or less mature and readily developed. And so, and at the same time, we want a technology surprise. So there is this kind of dichotomy going on here. We want something out quickly, but we're not willing to spend the time to do the early 6162 type of technology development. And I think, and also at the same time, those early lower TRL solutions do take time to develop, and they don't generally fit into a POM cycle. So I think we, if we want a true technology surprise, we would probably do us well to spend some time strategizing how we can leverage some of these lower TRLs and have a strategy to invest in them so that we can make those disruptive technology in the future. Um, Certainly, there is right now a great appetite to push technology out quickly, and those we can do. Industries certainly equipped to do this, but you know, for the more disruptive type, we have to do that homework, and this is where a lot of um, the national laboratories and service laboratories and those organizations that do their lower TRL type of work need to be better utilized. So,
All right, thank you. Dr. Alexander, last minute.
Yeah, I know we're short on time, so I'll leave it with this. MOSA, open standards, modular architecture, and model-based systems engineering. That trifecta is a winning formula.
All right, here. And David, what do you got for us?
Yeah, just once again, we have a Tarball zip file sandbox of the Power BI. It's part of Microsoft Office. Everyone here on the DoD side, at least, has the ability to get a copy of what we're doing for free and then adapt it the way they want to. This is a good part of the future. It's not the only way for the future, but we think if you start working with this, you're going to be probably getting yourself ready for what really needs to be in the future there for data support, data analytics, AI, and good visualization for the managers.
All right, thank you very much. I want to spend just a minute applauding the presenters and their co-authors for coming forward, being willing to stick their ideas out where other people could see them and exercise themselves intellectually in a way that few of us get compensated for. It's just the right thing to do to help advance our craft. This is a fast-moving train we all are latched into. It's a terribly exciting time to be in this business. And we have an opportunity to advance it even more. So the rest of you had a chance to stick with us, all 60 of you. Don't be shy, grab a co-author, write a paper. Whatever you're doing today, you are innovating. You are doing something that nobody else has done before. You are working on something interesting that deserves to be heard about. So consider writing an abstract this coming fall and being a part of this exciting opportunity to extend our practice, to make what we do better so we can outmaneuver and outperform with our technology capabilities to empower our warfighters to do the same to those with which we want to visit violence, because otherwise they would do the same to us. So with that, I would like to close out the conversation. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you all.